Welcome to Season 4, Episode 31 of Brackets, Bubbles, and Bid Stealers. I am Sam Fetterman. Jonathan Litskin is not with me today. He is feeling a little sick. He started coughing at the very end of our show last night, and he is unavailable today. He's on the LJ Cryer timeline. He's day-to-day. But Rocco Miller is here with us. This was planned before Jonathan had to go on the injured list. And Rocco, how you doing tonight?
Doing great, Sam. Good to be back on with you. How have you been?
I've been pretty good. I feel like we've had some really good college basketball over the last few days, and we have some really good college basketball coming up. And you've seen a lot of college basketball because, I mean, who knows who's funding all this? You're on the government's payroll or something with how much you fly around.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, I'm able to go out and do different business dealings during the day, and that allows me to be in certain parts of the country throughout the year. And these 5 months are the best 5 months of the year, bar none, despite the crazy travel conditions. Some of these weeks, like last week, I was in Connecticut and Virginia and a little bit of Massachusetts, had that storm Monday night, got stuck trying to get home from I was actually staying in Springfield, Massachusetts, trying to get back there from Yale. Had some technical difficulties. Literally, for the first time ever, I made the mistake of renting an electric car. Had no idea how to find charging stations, how to charge the car. Long story short, it took about 4 hours to get the thing charged. I made it back to Springfield at 2 a.m. But fortunately, I'm on a West Coast body clock at all times, so it felt like 11 o'clock to me. It was just a very bitter cold and night and learning experience. But yeah, overall, I certainly consider myself pretty lucky. And, I take the opportunity to want to see as many of these leagues. All 32 would be the goal every year. It's pretty much unrealistic, but I do think seeing teams live is way different than just sitting on the couch all day and flipping around channels. So it's awesome. And building the relationships with the staffs and the players is really fruitful as well, in my opinion.
Yeah, as you said, you've been everywhere, but we do have to start with some of the bigger games from today. Michigan State and Maryland. Michigan State kind of controlled the pace of this game for the first 20. Then the second 20, Maryland kind of started to come back. But at the end of the day, Michigan State was just too much, and Maryland just couldn't draw up the right play down the stretch.
Right. Yeah, I missed the majority of it. I was tracking it pretty close, Sam. I think, Michigan State's a team really still with a lot to prove in order to be an at-large caliber team. In last week's projection, I had them on the outside looking in, and they, of course, they've taken 7 losses. They've had a few great wins, like the Baylor win, even the Indiana State win is terrific. But getting wins away from home is what is going to get any team into the at-large picture. And so even though Maryland's not maybe a tournament level team this year, that's an important win for the Michigan State resume. Gets them to 12-7 overall, adds a road win that they really needed, and they can start to build off of wins like these. So they need to find a way to get it, and they got it.
Yeah, I mean, MSU now, they started the season 4-5. They've now won 8 of their last 10 games. They are 4-4 in the Big Ten after that 0-2 start. They have a big opportunity coming up on Friday night against Wisconsin. We don't exactly know who's going to be joining us on Friday night, but we will have plenty of discussion of that game as we break that down and then go into the big Saturday slate coming up on the 27th. But they have the chance, Michigan State does, to really make a statement at the Kohl Center on Friday. And as for Maryland, they were kind of crawling their way back towards relevance after that win in Champaign. But the loss to Northwestern kind of stopped the momentum. And this is still a team that has just really, really struggled to put the ball in the basket all season long. And it struck them again today.
Yeah, I think you look at the shooting numbers from Maryland. Today wasn't terrible per se. From 3, they were 8 for 22. Overall, they shot 21 for 50. That's a little less than where you want to be at the end of a game. They dominated the glass. Michigan State's actually a really poor rebounding team. Michigan State only had 2 offensive rebounds all game. They're somewhere around 150th in the country in offensive rebounding, which is kind of strange for a Michigan State program.
11th in the Big Ten.
Yeah, but Maryland, so they had those advantages, but like you said, without maybe like another third or fourth option after Young and Scott, Reese put up 10, but there's just not a whole lot of guys that can score or even look to score within this offense. Geronimo went 0 for tonight. And they didn't get anything really out of the bench besides Long getting 9. So, yeah, I think Kevin Willard, obviously a solid coach, but a lot of work to do, and now starting to run out of real estate with 8 losses.
Yeah, this is kind of a tough topic to talk about with just a guest instead of with the host and the co-host, but we do have to talk about it. We've kind of danced around it since the news came out, but we have to talk about it now. Terrence Shannon Jr. is back on the floor for the Illinois Fighting Illini. He played today. He scored 16 points in 27 minutes off the bench. The off-the-bench distinction was just that. It was just a distinction. He played starter minutes, and he played well because he's one of the best players in college basketball. Even with a month that he hasn't played a game, he's really, really good. But the question of should he be playing college basketball, I don't want to present to you that question. Like, if you have a strong opinion on this, I would be, I'd let you offer that.
Appreciate the opportunity, Sam. Yeah, I think in these cases it's tricky because, I think best practice is wait and see approach. Obviously, if the allegations are true, it's very serious, and he has no business playing at all. I think all of us would agree on that. But at the same time, there are some cases where, we're dealing with 18 to 22-year-old kids, and you have no idea what the situation is. And this isn't the only one that's out there. There's several of them across all college sports. I'm a Washington guy originally. We had one of our running backs in a very similar case as Shannon, and basically didn't see him the last 3 games of the regular season. Then all of a sudden in the college football playoff, he's playing. Nobody even really talked about it because he's not as big of a celebrity as Terrence Shannon is. But I think in all these cases, it's wait and see. Sometimes you see the charges dropped, and then you hate to see the player's name get shamed and it hurt his career and deny him the opportunity to play. Obviously, if it goes the other way and he is an accused, sexual assault, person that engaged, perpetrator and engaged in that activity, he doesn't belong to play at all. So it's really touchy because all these situations have similarities, but they aren't the same. So my opinion is not a strong one. It's just a wait and see until all the facts come out. Whatever happened in the Illinois case, I know there was a judge involved. There was enough there, I guess, to let him play for the time being. So that's what we're going to deal with. In general, basketball-wise, Illinois went 4-2 without him. They weren't horrible. They beat Michigan State. They beat Northwestern without him. They clobbered Northwestern without him. So
that was and they really started to wake up. And then they kind of killed Michigan, and he comes back today, and they kill Rutgers. They are maybe not quite as good as Purdue, but they are right behind them as number 2 in the Big Ten.
Yeah, they went to Purdue without him and only lost by 5. A very competitive effort, and I think a lot of times in all levels of college basketball, especially this high major level, when you lose a superstar like Shannon, there's still really good players behind him, and there's all these different combinations a great coach like Brad Underwood can put together. And sometimes that net result can either be equal to what you had before. Every once in a while, it can actually be better, just depending on what that chemistry looks like and how you're matching up with your opponent. Big Ten, you have so many different teams you play. So certain matchups, they might have been okay without him. So it's really, sometimes I don't think it's as big of a deal as it's always going to sound because he's always going to be in the headlines. But at the same time, I'm sure everybody's happy that he's back from a basketball standpoint.
Yeah, and it's a really, as you mentioned, a really difficult situation to discuss because, if the charges do eventually get dropped this is still a process that's going to take months, maybe years. And if at some point the charges do get dropped and you robbed Terrence Shannon of his final opportunity to play college basketball, that sucks. But it would suck even more if Terrence Shannon turned out to be guilty of these actions and you let him play college basketball through that. I don't know the whole situation. I don't think anyone knows the whole situation. But again, just the wait and see approach is the way to go. But not everyone's going to be on board with that.
Yeah, my last thought on that overall is if this was 20 years ago, there's no way he'd be playing because there wasn't the kind of money that's involved in college sports as there is 20 years later here today. So, yeah,
I mean,
the environment I grew up in is much different than today. It shows that the risk reward level to allow him to play, as long as there's not 100% evidence that he did what he's being accused of, is worth the risk from Illinois' perspective. 20 years ago, that wouldn't have been the case. It would have been hey, this is just a college sport. This kid's just on a scholarship. He's just like everybody else. We're going to treat him like any other student. That doesn't exist now because the money is way too big. And so many people's jobs are on the line. People get fired way faster for lack of performance, especially at a big program like Illinois. And so just the point I'm making is this is today's climate of big-time college sports, and it's, there's some consequences no matter how you look at it.
Yeah. I'm sure you had your eye on Indiana State today as they took down Murray State. This is one of the most fun teams in the country. I feel bad for talking about the Valley, the two-bid Valley without Jonathan. What are you're big into bracketology? What are your thoughts on the potential of a two-bid Valley?
I'm loving it right now as we speak. So I had Indiana State cleanly in as an at-large team on Friday. Today just helps embolden that a little bit more. It's a team that's 8-3 in road neutral games now, 4 of those true road wins. And they're one of only 2 teams to win at Bradley and one of 2 teams to win at Northern Iowa. And so although Bradley and Northern Iowa are not tournament caliber teams, those are very tough buildings to win in. And of course, Indiana State steamrolled everybody in their MTE, and they're undefeated at home. And their only 3 losses are to extremely difficult places to win in at Michigan State, at Drake, and at Alabama. So really no shame there. And we wouldn't be having this debate if they won any of those 3. But I do think the quality of play on the court is so dynamic. This team is so deep. They beat you in waves. Obviously running the high post game through Robbie Avila is such a NBA level style of offense and weapons all over the floor. Jordan Kent's having an unbelievable season, as are several other Sycamores. So, I think it's a team today, if you're looking at a 3-loss Indiana State team with those 3 losses and, a handful of just really impressive wins that I mentioned, I would take them in a heartbeat over a middle-of-the-pack Big 12, a middle-of-the-pack Big 10. Some of those teams they'll be compared against for those last, 10 to 12 spots in the bracket. Now, with all that being said, Indiana State plays in the Valley. You and I both know, and Jonathan knows, how difficult the Valley is. I'm expecting, today was a tough game. Murray State had a great game plan. They were all
through the kitchen sink at this
through the kitchen. Yeah, and they had 8 block shots through the first 25 minutes, and that was uncharacteristic. So you could tell Murray State had a great game plan. They executed it for 60% of the game, and then that 14-2 run by Indiana State flipped it. But on one of these nights, or maybe multiple nights, they're gonna get snipped by one of these types of teams, and so then it's going to be what their resume looks like after that. And of course, we're only going to get one auto bid from this league. Drake is right there as well in terms of an at-large resume. They're obviously the league leader today, so they don't have to think about that for the forecast purposes. But Drake is a team that also, them pounding Nevada was a huge statement, gives them a better win than Indiana State has overall for that one singular
and the event. Indiana State win in itself.
And the Indiana State win in itself, exactly. So, and Indiana State's got great metrics, obviously top 28 in the net coming into today. So there's a lot for Drake to build on as well. And I actually, if you run the Torvik numbers in the last month, Bradley's actually playing better than both of them with a healthy Connor Hickman. Different team without him in that 5-game losing streak. But now that he's fully healthy, Bradley's humming again. All 3 of those teams are playing at an elite level.
Yeah. And then it's the Valley's awesome. And I again feel bad for talking about it without Jonathan, because that's his neck of the woods. He gives us the Valley updates on every show. But yeah, I think you obviously did get to see Bradley, and you also saw
Yes.
Belmont, who's really, really fun, with Cade Tyson and Malik Dia.
Yeah.
Like that is the Valley just has some absurd talent this year. But the thing about Indiana State, I know that a lot, like a buzzword that gets thrown around a lot around March is the eye test. If Indiana State doesn't pass the eye test, there has never been a team in the history of the sport that passes the eye test. They might be the most eye test friendly team in the country. It's not, they don't just pass the eye test. They get a 105 on the eye test.
Well, that's what happens when you're second in the country in 3-point shooting percentage, you're second in the country in 2-point shooting percentage, and you're number one in the country in effective field goal percentage. I mean, it's a beautiful, well orchestrated offense, and Jordan Majewski does an incredible job. He lives in the area. I covered an Indiana State Drake game last year in Terre Haute, and didn't realize it the whole time, but Majewski lives out there, and so he watches. Yeah, he lives somewhere out there, but he's close. And I know he used to live in Terre Haute. He recommended some restaurants to me, so that was cool.
Nice.
Shout out to Jordan. He's incredible.
He's great. We got to get him on the pod at some point.
You should. You definitely should. But he made some great points online today just about, Murray State went to take away the typical flow of their offense, and he can Josh Schertz can flip that into a whole different attack. They have so many different ways that they can attack you, and I think that's what makes this team so intriguing. If they can get to March Madness, March Madness is an event built on winning 2 games a week. And when you have interchangeability, both roster wise and offensive scheme wise, you can go win 2 games and get to the Sweet 16. This team can do that. Yeah.
Something that the tweet that he quoted was like, how does every college basketball coach not watch Indiana State's offense and say, yeah, how are you going to do that?
That's the one.
It's so impressive just how well they space the floor. I saw this video of like a layup. I think Kevin Sweeney retweeted it. And it was like, lol, look at the spacing. And it was like Isaiah Swope passed the ball to the corner and immediately cut to the basket. And like his head was not even fully past the defender yet. And he had a wide open layup because nobody was going to help off of the 240% 3-point shooters on the weak side. So he just walks in for a layup.
Thing of beauty, isn't it?
Oh my God, they're so fun. Yeah,
they are.
And
knock on wood for good health. A team like Jordan Kent had a knee. It wasn't a knee; it ended up being his foot, and he was out for a good 10 minutes tonight. But he came back in the last 5, looked fine. You never know with those things how they're going to swell up overnight. So let's hope he's out there on Wednesday against UIC.
Yeah, East Tennessee State. I kind of expected them to be a little bit better than 1-5 in the SoCon. They lost today to Chattanooga, who's 4-2. I don't really think Chattanooga's all that great, but they do have that win against a Furman team that was not fully healthy at the time. They didn't have Marcus Foster in that game, but Furman fully healthy. You've seen this team play. How good do you think Furman is?
Well, Furman's been so banged up. I mean, they barely played any games with their full team, and they finally started getting healthy here in the last couple of weeks, where got them in position to really compete against Western Carolina. Otherwise, they probably would have fell. They lost to a non-Division I team back on December 30th that caught a lot of eyeballs. And I think, they've weathered the storm. They're extremely well coached, like they always are under Bob Ritchie and staff. You look at Marcus Foster's only played 9 games, right? JP Peguis actually missed a game in there, and Ben Vanderwall had a weird issue when I covered them at the Myrtle Beach Invitational, where he had a medical event. The ambulance came after one of the games and took him away. You had Alex Williams missing 5 games overall. He missed some time when I was covering the team as well. So they've been through a ton already, and that actually kind of puts them in maybe a stronger spot. Just all the stuff they've gone through, suffering a 6-9 start, and now getting back to 10-9, 4-2 in the league. They're right in the hunt to capture a SoCon title. They've got 2 Samford games ahead. The first big one this Wednesday at home. So obviously, if they sweep Samford, they're right in the mix. They're kind of back right this minute to where we might have thought they were start of the year. League title contender, probably somewhere between 80th and 120th in the nation. And, they've got a great group of guys and they have positive attitudes. So nothing's really going to get them down at this point.
Yeah, and that's a huge game coming up on Wednesday. We'll lead the show with the Iron Bowl of basketball, most likely, as that's a big game. We'll also discuss Villanova St. John's, and there's a lot of fun. There's a lot of fun basketball that night. But it won't be long before we talk Samford Furman on that night's podcast. I'll probably reach out to Brian Wilmer. I assume he's going to be at that game.
I would also mention on East Tennessee State's part, they've had a brutal schedule to start SoCon play. Those last 5 losses are Greensboro, Western, Furman, Wofford, and now Chattanooga. Wofford on the road. Very competitive, and almost all of them. The first couple were double digits, but Brooks Savage is going to be a great recruiter. Already is, and I think
I love Peterson.
Yeah, Peterson, and they've got a great home court advantage at Freedom Hall. I think by the end of the year they're going to be dangerous. They're just going to keep getting better over time. It's his first year. Nobody's going to throw in the towel at 1-5, and now they get a VMI game on Wednesday. Ideally, they go up there and take care of business. That'll get them back on track.
Yeah, and then they do have to go. They host Samford next,
and that
Saturday.
could be a rowdy environment. I've been to Freedom Hall. It's an incredible place when it's packed.
Crowd will get up for that as Buffalo misses the field goal. Wow! So the Chiefs are going to get the ball back with 1:43. For anyone listening on the podcast, I'm sorry, but that's very nice to see that the Chiefs are probably going to vanquish the Devils football team. Moving forward from some SoCon talk, I know you've seen a little bit of that. I don't really want to talk about the MAC tonight, but so Tulane defeated Memphis. You've seen Tulane, correct?
I have, yes.
Yeah, you were at the game when they played Bradley. Yeah.
Great game.
And tonight, another great game. I think the American Conference right now, the best team in the American Conference right now is Southern Methodist University.
At least performance metrics wise, SMU still got to prove it on the court against a high quality opponent. They've had their chances and fallen just short. But in all these other games, they're handling their business very well. SMU, and a program I know well. I went out to one of their preseason practices and got to know those players and a lot of guys they brought in the portal. It's a loaded team, a very athletic team. Tulane's somewhat similar. I agree. SMU's a stronger horse for the finish, no pun intended. But Tulane is a squad, also highly athletic. Lost a lot of heartbreakers this year. They lose at home by 1 to FAU. They lose by 3 at home to George Mason. They lose that game they easily could have won against Bradley that I was at. So they could have a gaudy record if they could finish close games. I think today's win will help them a lot confidence-wise. They did have a couple OT wins when they beat Furman in double OT and Tulsa in OT on the road just recently. But today's game was very interesting. Like from the Memphis standpoint, this is 2 games in 1 week where they didn't score in the final 4.5 minutes. It's almost the exact same thing that happened to them earlier this week with South Florida. Penny Hardaway had some very shaky quotes after the game talking about how the players aren't grasping the offense and grasping what's being called. That's extremely concerning at this level of the season, especially for a successful team that had an incredible non-conference resume. And so league play starting to get to Memphis, even a team that we thought would be right there at the top all year, and maybe they will be later. But this just goes to show how different of an animal conference play is at all levels. And for Tulane, they needed, like I said, this gets them back to 3-3 in the league. They have some great individual talent. Getting them to play together has not been as easy as it sounds, but Colby King's an incredible talent. Jalen Forbes is terrific. So is Kevin Cross. So
Zion James.
Yeah, Zion James. I mean, the athleticism on Tulane is off the charts, but they have a lot to do in terms of playing together defense, and a little more continuity on offense is better. But right now, the 180th ranked defense, you're not going to get anywhere with that mediocre of a D.
Yeah, but like Ron Hunter can really coach. That's
absolutely one of my favorites.
Just one of America's better coaches, probably in the top 75 of the best coaches in America, if not higher than that. He just wins. He won at Georgia State. He won at IUPUI. Like, who wins at IUPUI?
Only him.
And now he's
the only one.
He had a 20-win season at Tulane last year. Who does that? And he's building up for yet another 20-win season potentially this year. They need to finish 11-7, which is totally attainable in that league for him.
Yeah, one point I was trying to make earlier tonight on Twitter was just that the American Conference, more so than any other league, went after an extremely unbalanced schedule, whereas the top 7 projected teams, for the most part, you can draw an imaginary line there, are all playing each other twice. And then the bottom 7 projected preseason are all playing each other twice. So we have a cluster of teams at the top with 1 loss, I think upwards of 6. But out of those 6, only South Florida and Charlotte were projected at the bottom. So they have a much easier path going forward. If you looked at the schedule before the season started, Tulane easily had the toughest. They play Memphis twice. They play FAU twice. They play UAB twice, who they've already lost
SMU
to.
Twice, North
SMU twice. Yeah. To me, Tulane got dealt the most brutal hand. But if they can get wins within there, they're going to quickly get a resume. So it's pretty fascinating. And I always argue, regardless of at-large bid or no at-large bid, playing tough games night in, night out makes your team better. You learn so much about your team playing tough games. So screw your gaudy record that you want for your athletic director. Go out and play tough games because you'll create a better team in March. And Tulane's going to have that opportunity.
Yeah, totally agree with that. I actually didn't realize that about the schedule, but I look at it and wow, you're right.
Yeah, I mean, you look like at natural geography, it defies it because like UTSA, they probably one of the closest teams to them. They play them once, right? Because they're predicted at the bottom.
Yeah, I mean, UTSA played Temple twice, Charlotte twice.
Yeah, look at South Florida and Florida Atlantic. The only 2 teams in Florida play each other once, right? So it's all done based on how the league.
I like that. I think that's good.
It is. It's gonna create a lot more travel, but it's I think worth it.
Hey, if you're signing up for the American Conference in 2023-24, you're signing up for that travel.
That's right.
For just from a Memphis perspective, though, I am more than a little bit concerned, just given the fact that they've now lost 2 in a row after really squeaking by their first 4 conference games, aside from Wichita State. Now, SMU is obviously a really impressive win. SMU is higher in KenPom than SMU's higher in KenPom than Memphis, and right now they are a better basketball team than Memphis, so that's a very good win. But I just don't see Memphis and FAU the same way that I saw them a month ago. I just think that as a whole, bad month for those two in terms of furthering their tournament resumes, because I can't say for certain either of them is a guaranteed tournament team. I think FAU probably gets in and Memphis also probably gets in, but there's a path to the bubble for both of them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think first of all, Memphis, they've had just such a strange turn of events roster-wise throughout this campaign already with, Jordan Brown leaving, and then they bring in Naquan Tomlin to basically take his place, and Caleb Mills is out for the year. And, so obviously guys like David Jones, Javon Quinterly, Malcolm Dandridge, Jaquan Walton, et cetera, are heavily counted on. But I do think emotionally some of that probably has taken its toll. Again, Penny's quotes today were were very kind of head scratchy. But we're right smack dab in the middle of the dog days of conference play right now. And so, there is some of that where, all right, Memphis gets back to playing Memphis basketball. They could get hot again, no problem. They do have more talent than almost every other team in the league. So if they can right the ship and just, not going to UAB next Sunday is probably not the best recipe for that. But after that, they'll get home games with Rice and Wichita. That's an opportunity to get right as they cruise into February. As for Florida Atlantic, I think some of their syndrome has been a little bit of playing down to their competition. They're two really bad losses. The Bryant and Gulf Coast losses, they shot like terribly. But again, that's really concerning because that could happen against anybody on any night. So it's something to be leery of. And then I think obviously this UTSA game and the Wichita game earlier this week, some of it is just kind of staying with the level of competition. They have this knack to win close games at the end, like they somehow find a way to win today, and also the Wichita one. But I also think the injury to Giancarlo Rosado is a lot bigger than most people realize. I know, Sam, you and I were with them last March, so I know how big that is. I just don't think Trey Carroll and a couple of the other reserves can do what Rosado can do from a defensive, from an emotion, and from a rebounding standpoint to give Vlad Golden a blow or even just be a better matchup against a lot of their opponents. So ideally, they can get Rosado back by the end of February, but it sounds like he's going to be out for quite a while, and that's a big concern I have.
Yeah, and without Rosado, they have to rely so much more on Vlad Golden. And I like this team's forward depth more than I liked it last year, but they also don't have as much guard depth. I think with Brennan Lorian, I like Trey Carroll as a little bit as well. But Michael Forrest was really important. Nick Boyd has kind of been banged up all year. And I think John L. Davis looks like an All-American compared to last year where he looked like an all-conference player.
Well, John L's had to be. I mean, he's had to put on the cape so many times already. He's supposed to be saving the cape for – I mean, when he wore the cape against Arizona, that was incredible, and he needed to. But when he's wearing the cape against UTSA and Wichita, I mean, he's supposed to be saving the cape for the big games in March.
I mean,
so he could run out of gas at some point, which
I'm just impressed that he's been able to put on the cape as often as he has. I mean,
he's an incredible talent, man. He's a very incredible
talent. He scored
talent.
30 points 3 times this year. UAB game, UTSA, and the Arizona game where he was one of where I think he really opened up his All-American candidacy in that one. But he was also awesome against Charleston. He was awesome against Texas A&M in that one. In all of their biggest games, he's been amazing.
Yep.
And I think he's going to do that all year. And I remember I said, I think watching them against Butler, I was like, Vlad Golden has been their best player so far this year. Vlad Golden might be one of the most impactful big men in the country. And I remember he was very high in the Evan Miyakawa metrics last year. But this team goes as John L. Davis goes, and that's not a good thing considering what they were last year.
Yeah, I think it would behoove Dusty, and I'm not going to tell Dusty what to do. The guy's a genius, but just seeing the Arizona win, even though John L. made so many big buckets, it was also the best game of Jalen Gaffney's career. Games like that where you can get a Gaffney to step up, or Greenlee's been really clutch over the last 2 years when counted on. Weatherspoon can deliver. Nick Boyd's obviously awesome, but he went through a really tough injury this year. And Elijah Martin's just been a little bit off so far. I think
he was great today.
He was great today. That's a great sign. So, again, I think they're just trying to build it back up to when we get to March to be able to count on all these pieces. The thing that made Florida Atlantic so deadly last year was you didn't know which guy was going to snipe you, and it really all 5 of them could. And it's a lot of the same people. So they really just got to get a little bit more balance across those 5 in some of these games. And obviously they got to get better defensively. I mean, that's been a huge issue, dropping all the way down to the 96th best defense. That's not going to cut it. They got to get that thing closer to top 50.
Yeah. And then I want to just gloss onto the fact that Utah kind of kept their hopes for an at-large at this point in a good spot with the way that they played today, just winning at home against Oregon. They had a big weekend beating Oregon and Oregon State. They're now 5-3 in the Pac-12. How many bids do you think the Pac-12 is going to get?
Yeah, I don't know how it's going to shake out at the end. On Friday I had, of course, Arizona, the one elite team in the league. I had Utah very safely in on the 7 line. They got a nice that road win they had at St. Mary's just got a little bit better as St. Mary's continues to win, and they've now won 8 in a row. Colorado looked for sure like a tournament team for a while, but then they took the injuries to De Silva, Cody Williams. Now Hammond has been out. Obviously, Colorado played better this week, but I think they still have work to do to get in themselves. And then, Oregon's kind of a bubble-ish team themselves. So I think when it's all said and done, 4 sounds right. It's just been kind of, as a Pac-12 person here in the footprint, it's been really frustrating because the non-league, it happens all the time with this league, and this is the last go-around. So many missed opportunities in non-conference play across a bunch of these teams. And then all of a sudden they start, like teams like Arizona State start playing much better, and Oregon playing much better. And Oregon, of course, having a million injuries coming into league play. And even California, who I don't think would be a tournament team by any means, they've had like 7 heartbreaking losses, including another one on Thursday against Washington, beating them on a buzzer beater. So there's just a lot of little things like that can drag down the league. And that's been the issue. Stanford's had some huge wins, but they'll stub their toe more often than they'll get a big win. So it's just been really frustrating from that standpoint. And I think they're probably looking at a 4-bid league.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting because we've kind of talked about the Pac-12 as a mostly 3-bid league this year.
Yeah. Well, I think right now the only 3 that have the credentials would be Oregon, Utah, and Arizona, of course. Colorado's close. Washington State's close. And then I think the odds of a team outside of the first 3 I mentioned winning the Pac-12 tournament are a little bit greater than usual. Arizona has a huge home court advantage in the Pac-12 tournament, but Arizona's already been blown out by Stanford, and they've looked really shaky. Like they looked very shaky against UCLA yesterday. So it just seems like one of those years where maybe somebody's just, that next set of quality teams, somebody will step up and win 3 or 4 games that week in Vegas, but we'll see.
Moving on, the last thing that 2 more things I want to discuss. We didn't really get into Duke's upset loss to Pittsburgh last night. Blake Hinson was remarkable. Jalen Lowe was remarkable. And just going on the road with balls of steel really is what it felt like for Pitt. Just they had an answer for everything that Duke threw at them.
Yeah, very interesting because, of course, the first place my brain goes is Coach Capel, Duke, former Duke guy, big Duke guy. Of course, his players want to represent him well, assuming they all have close relationship with him. And I think there's been a thing over the years where Capel teams go into Duke and give them fits. And here we go again. It's kind of the same formula, different cast of characters. And as you said, Blake Hinson was tremendous. Putting up 24 points, but 7 for 7 from 3. Are you kidding me? Like, that's ridiculous. And he threw in 8 rebounds on top of that. So incredible night for Blake. He won't forget it. And of course, now standing on the scores table, all that, that just made it iconic to a Pitt lover. But great performances from Jalen Lowe, who had 17 and 6 assists. And
so many big shots.
Yeah, and look at the turnovers. They only turned it over 10 times. That's a good ratio for a game in a hostile environment. So, of course, shooting 50% from 3 gives you a chance for a road upset as well. And they out-rebounded Duke 32-25. So, overall, very surprising. Out of all of college basketball per Ken Palm, 145 college basketball games with D1 versus D1 yesterday. This was the biggest upset at only a 12% chance. So definitely not something I expected or even considered. But I do think that Capel factor I said at the beginning mattered quite a bit.
All right, you wanna answer some trivia question quickly?
I'll do my best.
All right. Blake Hinson ranks 6th in the country amongst players with 120 3-point attempts in 3-point percentage. How many of the 5 above him can you name?
I haven't studied it, so I'll just let you name them.
Gabe Madsen from Utah.
Yeah, excellent shooter. Excellent
Chaz
shooter.
Lanier from North Florida.
Okay.
Quentin Morton Robertson, the 5'8" point guard for Fort Wayne. And Quincy Oliveri from Xavier. And Javante Hawkins from FIU.
Wow.
And
Madsen's the only one that doesn't shock me. The other ones, I guess, the North Florida guy, I know that offense is insane. But for him to make it at that clip is really impressive.
And Blake Hinson is – this one should be a little easier for you. There are only 3 players in the country with 140 3-point attempts that are shooting over 40%. Hinson is one of them. Who are the other 2?
Huh. Shooting that many threes.
Yes.
Oh, man. I was thinking, geez, that's a ton of threes. I have to narrow it down to like who's even shot that many.
They're both like really, really notable guys. Like only one of them is at a high major, but like the other guy's a really notable mid major. Maybe that's just because of where he plays for me.
Okay. Tell me who they are.
Well, one of them plays in Texas and the other plays in the Northeast.
Gotcha. It's not one of the Vermont guys.
No. Higher mid-major than Vermont.
Higher, but it's at the mid-level?
Yes. Like a high mid-major.
So like a Bonaventure type, but they don't shoot enough.
You're right there. You're like right there.
I figured A10 is what you meant.
Yeah, it is.
Is it the UMass? Is it Josh Cohen?
No,
that
it's a guard. It's a guard.
Yeah, of course. Josh doesn't shoot threes. I got stuck on the geography there. It's not Keyshawn Hall.
No, a little further north.
Yeah.
South of me, but north of Keyshawn Hall.
It wouldn't be Jimmy Clark.
East of Jimmy Clark.
Sam, you're better. I'm telling you, you're better off telling me.
It's okay. We got time.
Who would have 100
on a team that's totally stacked with great guards?
Yeah.
With a coach that I've expressed doubts about.
Not Fordham.
No, not Fordham. They don't shoot.
They don't shoot. Yeah, they're all coast to coast.
Yeah.
South
of Fordham.
St. Joe's.
Yes.
Oh, of course, Eric Reynolds.
Yes, it's Eric
Obviously.
Reynolds.
Yeah, duh.
And then the other one is a high major from Texas.
That would have to be I'm guessing a Big 12 guy, right?
It's Big 12. Yeah, it's not Texas A&M.
Right. So
Wade Taylor is actually shooting the second lowest percentage of anyone with 143 point attempts.
Well, that explains a lot. Let's
but
see.
Is
it LJ Cryer?
It is not. LJ Cryer is at 38.6%.
It's not LJ Cryer.
Maybe even more obvious than LJ Cryer.
Wow.
One of the bigger names in the sport, thanks to something that he did a couple of years ago.
I guess. Well, Max Asmus?
Yes.
Okay. There you go.
Max Asmus and Eric Reynolds are the only two guys that are also shooting 40% on that many attempts. Guys shooting 39.5%. Ethan Taylor from Air Force.
Ethan's good. I like him.
He's really good. All right. The last thing that I want to discuss tonight before we get into some quick previews for tomorrow is a league that Jonathan and I kind of discussed a little bit last night, but we need to get deeper into it. The Big West. UC Davis got a big win. They are a really, really good basketball team right now. after beating UC Irvine last night. Eli Pepper had 14. Ty Johnson had 19. They're 7-1 in the league. You've seen this team in person. Yeah. What is so impressive about what they do?
Well, I mean, it's we talked before we came on the air, and like Eli Pepper is just he's a freak, man. Like he's built like a linebacker or a fullback, whatever you prefer. And he's only 6'4", 200, but he plays like he's 6'7", 6'8", because he's just too big to, and his shoulders are so wide and his elbows get out there. It's just like really hard to shut him down. Is what I realized watching him. And with them being at the top of the league right now, I was definitely tuned in yesterday for that Irvine win. That was a revenge game. They've already played Irvine twice. They lost in OT at Irvine, so that was a incredible pair of two games. They kept that thing in the 50s yesterday, which I thought was a good Jim Les strategy to keep that thing low scoring. And they're playing a top 75 defense. And, I know a lot of these teams we've already talked about, I keep going back to defense, but defense wins games flat out. So their offense isn't super efficient, but when they need buckets, they can go to Pepper. And when they need stops, they're getting stops. And I think you look at the entirety of the Big West, UC Davis right now, to my surprise and probably several others' surprise, that they're playing the best defense in the league. That usually is a staple of UC Irvine basketball. It's only decimal points apart. Irvine's number 2, and they are both far and away. Like if you look at the conference-only defense ratings after whatever it's been 7-8 games in the league, they're like 10 percentage points above third place, which is UC San Diego, the other incredible story in this league. So UC Davis getting it done with defense. They're basically adopting the Irvine model. I think Irvine still has better players, but the way Davis is playing, and a lot of old guys too. So some of the people that were picking UC Davis in the top 4 this year, I just couldn't believe it because they had so many close calls over the last few years and just kept falling short over and over and over and losing close games. But that experience, I think, has helped them a lot this year because they're not getting rattled late in games. And there's been a few games like the game I saw them against Santa Barbara where they can really just knock a team out mid game, and they blew Santa Barbara out the game I went to, which was also a surprise. So with every one of these wins, Sam, confidence is brewing and building. And when shots aren't falling and you have a good defense, you can still win. And that's all true for this UC Davis team so far.
Yeah, and that's not too far from you, right?
Yeah, it took me about an hour, almost 2 hours to get up there. It's just before Sacramento. Maybe 90 minutes on a good day.
Would you go up around the bay or would you go across the bay?
I'm on the East Bay now. I moved over to Oakland a couple of years ago, so I just go straight north.
Oh, wow. So it's 2 hours from Oakland.
Yeah, but it's probably not quite 2. On a good day, I could get there in 90, but you always want to account for a little. For some reason, on the way to Sacramento, there's always this little spurt in Vacaville where there's traffic on a work day. So going up there for a 7 p.m. tip-off, it's probably better for me to leave around 2. Then I have a chance to get there by 3:30. But
if you just keep going past Sacramento on that highway, you know where you end up.
A lot of places. But what'd you have in mind?
The George Washington Bridge.
Oh, there you go.
You end up right across the bridge from the great city of New York. So I recommend you do that at one point in your life. Just drive all the way across the country.
Yeah, I need to do that. I've done a lot of it, but never all in one trip. So that is a bucket list for sure.
Yeah. Then let's go down from Sacramento. Let's go to La Jolla, California.
Beautiful place.
One of the great stories of college basketball is unfolding right now, where Eric Olin in year 4 in Division I has UC San Diego at the number 1 offense in the conference, 6-1, with a win over Hawaii at home, led by Bryce Pope. Have you been able to watch much of this team?
I've been watching their highlights each time. I haven't, I've had a couple times where they were close with, I believe it was Santa Barbara, and I was watching the waning minutes to see how that finished up, and they got it done. That was a huge win for them, by the way. They won in the Thunderdome, which is a brutal place to play. So this UC San Diego team, I don't think a lot was expected of them. In fact, I think they were picked 8th, And, they're still in their fourth year of transition, so not eligible for the tournament. They will let them in the Big West tournament. So they'll have that opportunity. However, what this team's doing is they protect the ball very well. Bryce Pope is probably one of the best kept secrets out there. He's super effective at protecting the basketball, getting to the foul line. They run a lot of their stuff through him. He's a highly efficient guy at 108 O rating for the amount of minutes he plays. So they're getting a lot done that way, and they're also they're not playing the best defense, but they're so effective offensively. And you look at the Hawaii's a super defensive team, but UC San Diego was able to counter that. Playing a little bit more through Tate Jones, who's their 6'6", 200-pound wing. He had a nice night with 13 and 6, and he actually played incredible defense. Got a key block late. Had 3 steals as well. So it's been one of those like crazy Big West stories where the Tritons are putting it all together at the right time. It's not like we saw this coming in non-conference. They had 6 losses. They went up to Washington and lost by 27. So there wasn't like this expectation that they were going to do what they're doing. But, man, beating Long Beach, beating Santa Barbara, now beating Hawaii, those are 3 teams that we all thought would compete for the title, and they beat all 3 of them. And they were in there with Irvine for a while before fading late and losing by 11 just last Thursday.
And it's not just like they're pulling these wins out. The metrics back it up.
Yeah,
they are
big time.
They are 118th in KenPom right now.
Yep.
To another big story in this league, we were high on UC Santa Barbara coming into the season, and everyone was. I mean, this is AJ Mitchell's back, and they got Johan Traore, and they got Josh Pierre-Louis and Cole Anderson. They bring in Schlotzberg, but it just hasn't worked out. They are 4-4 in the league. They lost yesterday to Cal State Fullerton at home. That's not a great loss. Fullerton's just 2-5. What's wrong in Santa Barbara with Joe Pasternak's team?
Well, I think they struggle quite a bit defensively. That was certainly the issue when I saw them play at Davis. Davis was just running all their stuff and running right by them. A lot of pick and roll, a lot of high-low. Davis was just generating so many open looks. Now, after that rough stretch, that's when Santa Barbara – that was the league opener, and Santa Barbara ultimately started 0-3, which was a big surprise. Of course, lost at Riverside by 2, then lost that UC San Diego team we just discussed. They really started to get right, started playing better D. Playing Cal Poly and playing Bakersfield helped. But that carried over into a really good win, 2 really good wins over both Long Beach and Northridge prior to yesterday's loss. Fullerton is the team in the Big West, since you guys don't discuss them a lot. They're the team that I don't think anybody should ever sleep on. They're extremely well coached. They exploit all these different matchups against the top of the league. Almost every year, no matter how low they are, whether it's in KenPom or any other rating system of your choice, they know how to match up in this league. They've given Santa Barbara fits for years. They beat them there last year too. And, of course, they were starting 1-5 this year, so they were extremely desperate yesterday. And that was enough to get them the win. I do think Santa Barbara is going to be better as time goes on, as long as they stay healthy. The big answer to your question, though, Sam, is besides Cole Anderson and, Mitchell here and there, but he brings so much attention from the defense that it really comes down to Cole Anderson knocking down outside shots. Outside of Cole Anderson, they really don't have that big of an outside threat. And I've talked to other Big West coaches and even a couple coaches that face them in non-conference play, and they all said, just let them shoot, because they don't hit it at a very high percentage unless it's Cole or AJ if you somehow leave them wide open. So that's a big problem for the Gaucho roster, is they very limited shooting threats.
Yeah, and they own that. They don't take a lot of threes. They're actually 16th in the country in 3-point percentage. So they are a really good shooting team when they do shoot, and it's because much of that shooting is Cole Anderson. Nobody else has taken more than 38. And Cole Anderson's shooting 44%. So on a night where Cole Anderson is off, their whole team's in trouble. Off.
Exactly. Exactly. And so and Cole's had his even though he's played in every game, he's had some health battles as well where he can only go 20 to 25 minutes. So it hasn't been smooth sailing to say the least, but I do think that provides a window of hope as well if you're a Gaucho fan.
All right, moving on. Talking about tomorrow night's games. 9:00 on CBS Sports Network is a battle of two teams on Long Island. That's going to be a really fun one because Hofstra is a very unique offensive team and Stony Brook is a very unique defensive team. I'm not sure how much of either of these teams you've gotten to see. It's okay. You can say you haven't seen them if you haven't.
Yeah, well, I mean, here's the fact, Sam, is I track all 362 teams. So even if I've seen them or not, I'm very familiar with the data, how they're performing, how they're trending, etc. Yeah. And then, of course, I try to. Yeah, exactly. So it's just some of these. So Stony Brook, I remember watching them earlier this year, and I was very impressed. It was actually that opener against St. John's. They started hot and then eventually faded, and I saw them a little bit in that Nebraska loss as well. But I had the impression that they were going to be feisty in this league. You also have the Geno Ford situation there where, I do believe there might be a little bit of a hot seat for him. Some people were actually surprised he was retained after last year that I've talked to. So, it seems like the troops have rallied a little bit around that, and they're an older team. Look at all the seniors they throw out there. So I think they're going to hang in most of league play as they have. I mean, their losses in league play have been in overtime, just by 3 on Thursday to Delaware, and a close 6-point loss to a good Charleston team. So, and they have a road win at Northeastern, not an easy place to go, Matthews Arena, and get a win. So I think you also have to, when you look at a Stony Brook Hofstra matchup at any time, obviously natural rivals out there on Long Island. I feel like they're going to get after each other, and I always like to look at what happened the year prior. So you look at last year's Hofstra matchups, and the one game at Hofstra was embarrassing by 21. And when they came to Stony Brook, it was a really good game, tight game, even though Stony Brook's season was pretty much over and they lost by 3. I feel like since this is at Stony Brook, it's going to be a war.
Yeah, it's going to be a war. You got a 7-footer like Keaton Fitzsimmons, and you get a 6'10" guy as active as Chris Mido. And then you have Andre Snoddy, who's also super active. Their hands are everywhere. They are just very good at defending, and even if their numbers really haven't been great defensively this year, this is a strong defensive team, and I will ride that for a while, especially on the inside, with how much they can affect shots with their length. Their guards are not great defenders. That's kind of the Achilles heel of that defense, why it's ranked 241. And that's kind of where Hofstra can exploit them, because Hofstra's does a really good job at creating mismatches. They get their littles on your bigs and their bigs on your littles a lot. But Stony Brook's bigs can guard littles, even with how long they are. Mido is one of the best. Mido is one of the more underrated players in the country because his arms are so long and he's so mobile. But, I mean, we know how good Tyler Thomas is and D-Stone Dubar. We've talked a little bit about Hofstra on the show. Hofstra's fun. They're really fun. But they've been a little disappointing, I think, in conference play. They're 2-3. They lost to Northeastern and Campbell.
The Campbell loss is a tough one. Yeah.
Yeah, they shouldn't be taking those losses. Moving on, Kansas and Cincinnati both need big time bounce backs tomorrow in Lawrence. The Jayhawks probably will get it because, again, it's in Lawrence.
Right.
Cincinnati has been the number 12 offense in Big 12 play. Kansas has been the number 10 offense in Big 12 play. Defense in Big 12 play. But Kansas has been the number 1 offense in Big 12 play because they're shooting 61% inside the arc. They are just really good at feeding Hunter Dickinson. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think you get Kansas on a national TV game like this, big spotlight game. I don't think Cincinnati's been a part of a game quite at this national level in a long time, coming from the American Conference. I think that could be really overwhelming for the Bearcats. And, I was impressed on how they performed at BYU, getting that road win, weathering the storm, taking BYU out of their offensive flow. Certainly, I think they'll come prepared with a good defensive game plan, but I just think the moment, the spotlight, the hunger that Kansas will bring will probably be too much. But we'll see. I like this Cincinnati team more than I think most do. So I don't want to completely write them off going into a game, but this is a really tough spot for them.
Yeah, another fun one, closer to your neck of the woods, but not quite your neck of the woods. In the Big Sky,
Yes,
between Montana and Weber State. Weber State, obviously. Were you at the game against St. Mary's?
I was not, but I had that thing on. I was at the game earlier that week when when St. Mary's looked awesome and killed New Mexico. But that game against St. Mary's was incredible, where Dylan Jones basically took the game over.
Yeah, and Dylan Jones is just simply one of the best players in college basketball. He's a double-double machine, and they're going to go up against a Montana team that has been really good this year on the offensive side of the ball. They're 3-2 only in the league, and this is actually the second time they face each other. And in the game at the D Events Center, hosted by Weber State in Ogden, the Wildcats actually won that game by 30. And Money Williams did not play for Montana, and he's still dealing with that injury. I'm not sure what the situation is, but he's a fun freshman. How do you think Montana can kind of play around that against Weber State?
Yeah, Money's one of the best freshmen in the country, if you ask me. Certainly at the mid-major level, but just the fact that it's so hard to crack a rotation as a freshman now in the high major level, he's one of the guys to watch when he's healthy. Unfortunately, he hasn't made it back. But Montana, has adjusted pretty well lately to life without him. I do think Northern Colorado's a very good team, so not a huge shame in losing to them in overtime a couple weeks ago. And going and winning at their rival Montana State by 10 is a great springboard into this huge home matchup with Weber. And Weber themselves has looked pretty human. Obviously, Eastern is steamrolling everybody right now. And again, I'm not going to blame Weber too much for losing by 2 there. But going on the road when they lost at both Sac State and Portland State, those are 2 teams Weber needs to be able to handle. To get beat on the road on both of those was really concerning. And now they got to go back on the road. Montana's a tougher place to win than either of those 2. I just have a small lean to Montana, but you also look at the series history. The immediate history tells you these 2 schools actually enrolled last year in the Road Win Exchange program, where they each won on each other's home court. So that's another interesting dynamic. Montana's got.
I've never heard it described that way.
Yeah, and I think it's the right way to go. If you care about your resume, you should both enroll together as a tandem. This Grizz team is pretty inconsistent, as you alluded to, but Weber has been lately too. So who knows? Maybe we'll get another Road Win Exchange program. Usually travel
because Weber won by 30 at home.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, you're right. Thank you. So that won't happen this year. So Montana's got the revenge factor. Thanks for reminding me. And I do think another factor in this matchup is a lot of the teams that come from sea level and go up to either Weber State or Montana have that extra challenge. It's probably the toughest part of travel anywhere in the NCAA. However, when they play each other, they're kind of both used to that. So it negates one of the biggest factors. So it really is kind of just straight up basketball from there. Anyway, with all that being said, I expect a great game, and both teams really need it.
The last game I want to talk about, we were talking with Jim Root on Friday, and he said, we were talking about McNeese. Is McNeese going to run the table in the Southland? And he said, no, I think they lose at Corpus Christi.
Nice.
That game is happening tomorrow night. It's Corpus Christi. It's the number 2 team in that conference, and it's McNeese, the number 1 team in that conference. Shahada Wells, Christian Shoemate, Antavion Collum, DJ Richards, just unfair roster, unfair coach in that league against a Corpus Christi team that's maybe not what they were last year with Steve Lutz and with Terrion Murdix and Trey Tennyson and Isaac Mushilia, but they're still pretty good. They're 4-1. Do you think they have a chance to take down mighty McNeese?
I'll put it to you this way. If anybody knocks off McNeese this year, it's probably going to happen in this game because I do think Corpus Christi is performing like the second best team. They've got some impressive wins when it all started when they went to UTEP on November 29th, when UTEP was pretty hot, and cooled them off with a really impressive road win. And then, as Southland play has developed, they've been handling most of their business. A 3-point loss at New Orleans hurts a little, but a 4-1 start is awesome for a team under first-year head coach Jim Shaw. Jim's a good friend of mine, and I'm friends with a lot of the guys on the staff. If I had a drink right now, I'd pour one out because I was actually supposed to be at this game tomorrow. But I'll be there in spirit and certainly be watching this one. Now, like you said, McNeese is so dominant. They have the cleanest pass to the NCAA tournament in the country because they host the Southland tournament in Lake Charles. And so this is the one night maybe a Southland team can actually beat them. And Jim was bold and made the call. I guess I shouldn't predict that, but I do think
I'm not sure. Now I'll have to go back and watch the tape because he might have said if it happens in this game. But I think he said that it might happen.
Right. That's kind of what I'm saying. If it happens anywhere along the way, like I don't see them losing at Sela or at Nichols or maybe at Lamar potentially. But Corpus Christi's got the best shot because Corpus Christi is a team that is building a winning culture. They have a few decent, talented players, nothing like McNeese, but they're playing the second best defense, Sam. So we keep talking about is that defensive pedigree. So they're going to have a strategy to take guys like Shahada Wells out of the game however possible. If they're able to effectively do that, they're going to catch McNeese maybe.
Tournament starts today. Does McNeese have an at-large resume?
Almost. They're actually fairly close. I would still have them slightly out. If they run the table, then of course they get to
29-2.
Yeah, 20. Well, you would have to give them another loss, otherwise they're
31-2, 30-2,
30-2.
Sorry.
Yeah, you'd have to give them another loss. And of course, any loss from here for them is going to be a quad 4. So that's going to hurt. Now, I do think if they are 30-3,
you got to let them in.
Probably. I got to look at their bracket again because I think the regular season only gets them to 27, so they might end up.
No, it's 31. Oh no, because there's like there's 4 non-D1s.
No, you're right. Yeah. If you take away the non-D1s, the committee won't look at those. But again, I think it's going to be difficult to leave them out. I think depending on, so much of it comes down to like this sounds silly and I don't particularly like it, but these resume metrics that are on the team sheets, the strength of resume and the KPI actually starts to matter quite a bit for a team like this because there's no other real way to compare them to teams with way more data, right? So they, of course, left non-conference with 2 quad 2A wins, both at VCU and at Michigan. And,
I think the VCU win will age really well comparably to the Michigan.
Yeah. Well, VCU is already stronger than Michigan today, 91 and 94.
Yeah.
Which is funny. And so the strength of resume right now is 44th. So if they can stay in that range, again, I think a loss though, that's the problem. Like if they lose, even in the championship game, it could go from 44 to 54, and then they're out. So, and again, it's a committee full of ADs and presidents interpreting this information. So you might see, depending on how they're discussed, them thrown into the first 4. It is possible. Belmont made the first 4 in a similar scenario, and so did Drake, even though they're in much stronger leagues than the Southland.
Yeah.
Difficult question to answer. And of course, if you're a McNeese fan, you just root for every bubble team to lose every single day. But that, of course, creates new bubble teams, and I'll digress from there.
All right, Rocco, thank you so much for coming on Brackets, Bubbles, and Bit Steelers tonight. We had a really great show. We'll make sure to have you on again. If you came, I already forgot the outro that Jonathan did. All right, if you came to hear about Tyler Self's job, if you came to hear about traffic in Vacaville, California, if you came to hear about the latest happenings with Caleb Grill, you came to the right place. This has been Brackets, Bubbles, and Bit Steelers, and we will see you next time.